You are listening to Preston's Poetry Podcast.
There are a lot of forgettable poems out there which probably impressed someone, meant something to the writer, or marked a turning point in a poet's progression. Others I remember, but I look them up from time to time as examples, many of which have landed in this podcast. Then there are a select few that really stick with me. And of those select few, a handful of poems I keep with me all the time because they have continued to speak to me throughout the years. I read today's poem in the back of a prayer book maybe 10 years ago, and the forgotten appendices way in the back of the book. But my prayer book got this permanent crease in that spot. The glue of the binding became exposed from those last final 20 quarter-ply pages being held open so often. It's another poem by Gerard Manley Hopkins. It's not among his most well-known poems, but I think it is one of his best. Some history first, because I think Hopkins is a very innovative poet that didn't get the attention he deserved in time. Hopkins wrote this sonnet around 1885. He was a Jesuit missionary, a convert to Catholicism. This was part of a series of rather dark sonnets that he wrote and kept in private. After his death, 4 years later, in 1889, his works fell into the possession of another poet, Robert Bridges. The two had exchanged a number of letters about Hopkins' poetry and the great ideas he had, but it seems that Hopkins was far more starstruck by Bridges than the other way around. Bridges published a flippantly curated edition of Hopkins' poems in 1918. It wasn't until 1930 that a second edition was released as Bridges was dying, edited this time by poet and novelist Charles Williams, a close friend of T.S. Eliot, and fellow inkling with C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. Williams was impressed by Hopkins, and the second edition then helped bring more attention to the genius that Bridges had buried. And since then, we have discovered new poems and new editions come out regularly. I think it's unfortunate that Hopkins' work was not given the attention it deserved, because today's poem has impacted me far beyond anything by Bridges. It's a very good example of how poetic form may function for a reason to help the rhetorical purpose. It's not just that Hopkins picked some form out of thin air and it had nothing to do with the subject matter. So that's something I want to talk about today, is how the form of a poem can function. It follows a function. It's a poem about being kind to yourself. It's known as Poem 47 or My Own Heart after the first line. Have a listen. My own heart let me more have pity on. Let me live to my sad self hereafter kind, charitable. Not live this tormented mind, with this tormented mind tormenting yet. I cast for comfort I can no more get by groping round my comfortless than blind eyes in their dark can day, or thirst confined thirsts all in all, and all a world of wet. Soul, self, come, poor Jack self, I do advise you, jaded, let be. Call off thoughts a while elsewhere. Leave comfort, root room. Let joy sighs at God knows when to God knows what. Whose smiles not wrung, see you? Unforeseen times rather, as skies between pie mountains, lights a lovely mile. So this is a sonnet, and as we talked about before, sonnets generally are commentary poems. They're either in two-group or three-group formations, and this is a two-group sonnet, meaning it introduces an idea, then comments on it in the second stanza, what Billy Collins calls the turn, or more classically, volta. The first group introduces the idea. It begins, "My own heart let me more have pity on." Now there's already a lot there. That whatever it is that's bothering him, it's probably self-induced. And beyond that, that one can be kind to one's own heart. Notice the use of let. Let me more have pity on. As if there's a certain way of thinking that can just be set aside to allow oneself to have pity on their own troubled mind. What happens when we're not kind to our own troubled mind? We go on living with this tormented mind tormenting yet. Hopkins' idea here is that being so hard on ourselves doesn't work. All of the focus on our own discomfort is ineffective. We think the only way out of the discomfort is through it, but that doesn't deliver any comfort. Quote, "I cast for comfort, I can no more get by groping round my comfortless. Just like blind eyes looking for light, quote, than blind eyes in their dark can day." If we think about that a moment, daylight is there whether the blind eyes see it or not. Now here's a subtle theological and psychological point that many of you might disagree with. Trying to find comfort in discomfort is ineffective. Being at peace with suffering is no solution for Hopkins. Being focused on the suffering at all, he thinks, won't cure us. It's a pretty avant-garde perspective we often now call cognitive behaviorism, only some 100 years earlier. Our mindset towards our own troubles can impact how much trouble we actually have. My favorite lines then follow. "I cast for comfort I can no more get by groping round my comfortless than blind eyes in their dark can day." Or, here it is, "Thirst can find thirsts all in all a world of wet." Thirstiness makes you want water, and all the world is wet. The cure is there, but you won't find water if you keep focusing on how thirsty you are. The attention toward your own thirst would require you to look for water and not at thirstiness. So he says it is with suffering. And I think this goes for any negativity or need. Now, poetically, there's a lot of beautiful rhythm and alliteration here. It contains a subtle happiness, a kind of way of expressing a rather big psychological take. Thirst can find thirsts all in all, hyphenated, like the end-all be-all, all in all, and all a world of wet. The repetition of thirst and all in the alliteration of world and wet are almost little jokes, a smile, like a mother to a sick child. In fact, Hopkins has been rhyming this entire time, and we missed it. If we follow the enjambment rules by reading past lines without punctuation. "I cast for comfort I can no more get, then thirsts all in all a world of wet." We were so absorbed in the comfortlessness, the suffering, trying to make our way even through the poem, that we forgot to look at these beautiful rhymes and the meter. That's when we get to the second stanza, the turn. This, in contrast, is full of punctuation and pauses. Soul, self, come, poor Jack self. Addressing himself with rising and falling intonation. It reads like pity. "I do advise you," he says to his jaded, pessimistic, cynical self, "let be. Call off thoughts a while elsewhere. Doesn't really matter where they go. Leave comfort, root room. Let joy sighs at God knows when to God knows what. You might notice the repetition of let here, but what I find interesting is that we would normally, I think, say, let your joy come from God knows what for God knows how long. First being joyful at a thing, and then for a certain duration. But no, Hopkins starts with God knows when at God knows what, implying that taking the time and space is more of a priority than exactly whatever thing happens to be bringing you the joy. And I think he's really right. I think it first takes space, time, rest, some room to overcome bad feelings. First, the time and space, God knows when, and then the plethora of joyful, happy things in all a world of wet, in a world filled with things that can deliver us joy. He then comments about God, having mentioned God already. He says that God's smile's not wrung, meaning that God's not frowning. The future is brighter than we expect, he says, as unforeseen times rather, as skies between pine mountains, lights a lovely mile. The future behind the obstacles, beyond them, is open and free, skies between mountains. And those final words, lights a lovely mile, is itself so calming, and optimistic. Poetically, the first stanza is full of enjambment and longer phrases, running over lines and repeating words almost neurotically. But the second is full of semicolons that cause us to stop and pause. And when it does run over the line, we are then forced to stop again, call off thoughts a while, next line, elsewhere. So I hope that you can see that of all the poetic things that are happening here, all of these tools that he uses serve a purpose. They're not just loose from the message. The form and the message work together in a kind of harmony. Have another listen. My own heart let me more have pity on. Let me live to my sad self hereafter, kind, charitable. Not live this tormented mind with this tormented mind tormenting yet. I cast for comfort I can no more get by groping round my comfortless. Then blind eyes in their dark can day, or thirst can find thirsts all in all a world of wet. Soul, self. Come, poor Jack self, I do advise you, jaded, let be. Call off thoughts a while elsewhere. Leave comfort root room. Let joy sighs at God knows when to God knows what. Whose smile's not wrung, see you? Unforeseen times, rather, as skies between pine mountains, lights a lovely mile. I always advise looking at both the form of a poem and its subject matter at the same time from the very beginning. And Hopkins shows us that we have good reasons to do that. When he's talking about the waste of time that focusing on our suffering is, he's running over lines, the pace is high, the repetition, all in all, and not live this tormented mind with this tormented mind tormenting yet, mimics that kind of anxiety. But then when we get to the turn, as he's leading us to the idea of calming down and being kind to ourselves, we get lines like soul, self, like an inhale, exhale. And the form of the poem serves a function. This is actually a rather modern take on poetics. Earlier, you tried to write a good sonnet, and then you worried about the subject matter. As long as you were making a commentary, you were fine writing a sonnet. Hopkins breaks the sonnet form in a way, as we've talked about before, or rather you can think he enhances it. The form serves a function. The poetics of rising and falling stresses functions like rising and falling breaths. Enjambment and repetition drive us onward and is mixed with lines about anxiety. There's this counterpoint between the message and the philosophy, as well as the poetics that he uses to express it. Now, I recommend sitting with this poem, like I did with my prayer book so many years ago. It was filled with psalms and sermons, but this little 2-stanza sonnet delivered me years of help and comfort. This is the poetry I've been talking about this whole time. Read this poem slowly to yourself. The rhymes and rhythms will stick in your head pretty quickly. It's not a difficult poem to memorize, actually, if you want to do that, but in any case, it itself is an exercise in calming down. Something I find myself thinking quite often that we don't do nearly enough, calming down. Maybe because we don't have the room or the time or the ability to. Perhaps a little bit of this poem, like a concentrated therapy session or vacation, will help us see that beyond the world of our present struggles lights a lovely mile. Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. My favorite lines of today's poem were, of course, "Thirst can find thirsts all in all a world of wet." Tell me yours or ask me stuff at Presence Poetry Podcast Facebook or Instagram pages or at presencepoetrypodcast.com. We'll see y'all.